All right, folks, welcome back. This is the second of 3 videos covering the second half of Chapter 8, Section 6, which covers the law of cosines. In this case, in the last section we were given side angle side and we were asked to find the third side. Now we are given 3 sets of sides and asked to find an angle. So again, when we're setting up the law of cosines, we're always looking to see which angle we are working with. Whichever angle we are working with, the side opposite that angle, which in this case would be the 8, would be by itself, because we always name the side lengths the lowercase versions of their opposite angles. So our equation would be little m squared equals little p squared plus little q squared minus 2 times p times q times the cosine of angle m. Now again, you don't really even need to write that equation when you're doing it on your own, but this is how the setup works. The 8 squared would be by itself. Then we would have 6 squared plus 3 squared minus 2 times 6 times 3 times the cosine of x degrees. Now we are then going to be solving that equation for x, which is easier said than done. Now that being said, there are parts of it that you can feed to your calculator. Now, as an honors math student, I would hope you would not need a calculator to know that 8 squared is equal to 64. Some of those, though, the number will be a big, ugly number, and you'll have to actually think about it. Okay, then we've got 6 squared minus 3 squared. You can put that in your calculator right now. All of that can be put in there. And that is 36 plus 9, which is 45. And then the final piece that you are allowed to put into your calculator all at one time is the negative 2 times 6 times 3, which is negative 36. But then that is being multiplied by the cosine of x, which is where most people get screwed up. They think they are allowed to put the entire right side, except for the cosine, into their calculator. But you cannot do that, because PEMDAS says, order of operations says, that the multiplication between negative 36 and cosine, that has to happen before you can subtract 45 and 36. So if you do 45 minus 36, you will absolutely get the problem wrong 100% of the time, because that's not how order of operations works. So once we get those 3 pieces plugged in, we need to solve for x, which means we need to solve for cosine of x. We need to get cosine of x by itself. So pretty much what we do is the same things every single time. This purple piece, 45, is positive, so we are going to subtract it from both sides to get rid of it. That would give us 19 equals negative 36 times the cosine of x. And then, to get cosine of x by itself, that is being multiplied. So we will divide both sides by negative 36, which will give us that cosine of x is equal to negative 19 over 36. Now I left space there on purpose, because earlier in the chapter when we did SOHCAHTOA, we talked about how to free a variable like x from the cosine function. To free it, we would need to take the arc cosine or inverse cosine of each side. So I left room so that I could show that work. Because cosine and negative cosine would cancel each other out, leaving us with x is the arc cosine of negative 19 over 36. So we're going to feed that into our calculators. Again, to get arc cosine, we hit second cosine. Then we're going to type in negative 19 divided by 36 and hit enter. That will give us that x is 121.85. Now the directions are still specifying rounding to the nearest tenth, which means that x is approximately 121.9 degrees. It is an angle measure, so its unit is degrees. Now, something to keep in mind is that cosine can actually have a negative value in a triangle. What that means is that if you're being asked to take the arc cosine of a negative number, you should always get an obtuse angle over 90. If it's a positive number you're taking the arc cosine of, you should get an acute angle every time. So that's a little helpful hint. All right, on to the next one. We have there angle J is what we're being asked to find. So little j, which is the opposite side, should be by itself. Little m and little k will be on the other side of our equation. So we have little j squared equals little m squared plus little k squared minus 2 times m times k times the cosine of angle j. Plugging in our numbers, that's 1.9 squared equals 2.1 squared plus 1.3 squared minus 2 times 2.1 times 1.3 times the cosine of x. Now again, pieces of this can be plugged into your calculator. 1.9 squared is 3.61 equals, and then we can feed in 2.1 squared plus 1.3 squared to get 6.1, and we can feed in negative 2 times 2.1 times 1.3, which is negative 5.46 cosine of x. Again, from there we do the same two steps every time. We subtract 6.1, which is the purple number, to get rid of that. So 3.61 minus 6.1 is negative 2.49 equals negative 5.46 times the cosine of x. Then we divide by negative 5.46, and I wouldn't even bother to reduce this other than to cancel the negatives. So I would just leave it as cosine of x equals 2.49 over 5.46, because we can't round an intermediate step anyway, and we're just going to take the arc cosine. So then to free x, we take the inverse cosine of each side. Those cancel, and we have x is the arc cosine of 2.49 over 5.46. Clean that up a little bit so it's nice and readable. And we feed it to our calculator. Second cosine, 2.49 divided by 5.46 is 62.86, meaning we should round that up to 62.9 degrees. Again, video lesson. If you need more time to write it down, just pause the video. We are going to continue to the next two examples. So here's two more examples, same idea. Again, we are looking at, well, what angle do we know? R, which means little r should be by itself. So if we were going to write the equations in terms of r, s, and t, the side lengths, it would be little r squared equals little s squared plus little t squared minus 2st cosine of angle r. Now, really what we need to be able to do is plug in the numbers from the problem. So 3 squared equals 6.1 squared plus 4.5 squared minus 2 times 6.1 times 4.5 times the cosine of x degrees. Again, pieces of this can go into the calculator. Hopefully we do not need a calculator to know that 3 squared is 9. We are allowed to plug in 6.1 squared plus 4.5 squared all at once. That would give us 57.46. And we are allowed to plug in negative 2 times 6.1 times 4.5 to get negative 54.9 times the cosine of x. Then, same as the others, subtract 57.46 from each side. A little bit tight on the space there. So 9 minus 57.46 is negative 48.46 equals negative 54.9 times the cosine of x. Then we divide by negative 54.9, same steps as the other two examples. Again, there's no point in turning that into a decimal. Leave it as a fraction, just cancel the negatives. Negative divided by negative is a positive. So the cosine of x, which I'm actually wishing I'd left a little bit more space than that. There we go. Cosine of x is equal to 48.46 over 54.9. And we get rid of the cosine by taking the arc cosine of each side. Cosine and arc cosine cancel. X is the arc cosine or inverse cosine of 48.46 over 54.9. Into the calculator it goes. Second cosine, 48.46 divided by 54.9 is 28.03, which means we would leave that as 28.0 degrees. I believe final example of this. Yep, final example of this. We've got x is opposite 61. Again, that means that little v, little u, and little w, little v will be by itself. Hopefully by now we see where this is coming from. We're looking at 61 squared equals 50 squared plus 29 squared minus 2 times 50 times 29 times the cosine of x. Pieces of that can be fed to the calculator. 61 squared is 3,721. 50 squared plus 29 squared is 3,341, and negative 2 times 50 times 29 is negative 2,900 times the cosine of x. Same deal, we're going to subtract the purple piece, so subtract 3341 from each side. 3721 minus 3341 is 380 equals negative 2,900 times the cosine of x. Then we divide by the negative 2,900. This time the negatives do not cancel. Again, that's not a problem. That just means that our cosine of x is a negative value. Again, I would not bother to reduce. There's no reason to. Your calculator is just going to look up the value when we take the arc cosine of each side. Cosine and arc cosine cancel. So x is the inverse cosine of negative 380 over 2,900, and feed it to your calculator. Second cosine, negative 380 divided by 2,900 is 97.52. Again, the directions say it around to the nearest tenth, so that would be 97.5 degrees. That does it for law of cosines. Now there is still one more piece to this section, and that is Heron's formula for finding the area of a triangle given side, side, side information. That will be covered in the third and final video for section 8.6.